All right, it's Friday, we made it. So today's class is I took your student questionnaire, like I took that last thing that you wrote, like the question to me, took them, I wrote them down, and I put them in this hat. So it kind of will be like a regular class. If we were physically in class, what I would do, I'd give you a scrap sheet of paper, you'd write your question, you'd fold it up, you put it in the hat, I'd draw it. So we're gonna try to simulate that a little bit. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so I'm just gonna pick them out. Just pick them out at random. All right, so first one. Golly, this is good. If you could replace grass with something else, what would it be? Replacing grass. I would say bubble wrap. So like when you step on it, you know how good it feels to, like, you get bubble wrap and you pop it. You know how good that feels? Imagine walking on that and doing that every day. That could be pretty cool. That's the first thing that came to mind. All right, next. Good question though. I like that. It's creative. All right, next. If you were president, what would you do to fix the country? Golly, you're talking about like two totally different ends of the spectrum right there. Those first two questions. I'm already loving this. What would I do if I was president? All right, so because my background, my expertise is more so in education, I believe that's where I would start. The first place I would start is I would make it, or I would attempt to. You're looking at federal law versus state law in this situation, but I don't believe that kids at 16 years old should have the ability to decide if they're going to drop out of high school or not. I definitely don't think that age should be 16. I believe it should be 18 at a minimum. That's just because you're an adult, but you really, honestly, there's only a very small handful of people that are actually adults at 18. Until you start paying your own bills, it's hard to really, be considered an adult because there's just so much that you hadn't learned yet. And that's nothing wrong with that. That's just, the way these things go. But that would be my first step. If you drop out of high school, you're gonna have a hard time finding a job. Because you're having a harder time finding a job, you're gonna make less money. You are more likely to have health issues and to take up like recreational drugs, smoking cigarettes, dealing with like alcoholism, and something that I've just really just kind of found out like over the past, recently, 75%, and this is a crazy statistic, and I'm still kind of doing a little more research on this because it seems outlandish. But from what I've read, 75% of the crimes in our country are committed by people that have dropped out of high school. Now, that's worrying to me because the population of, the amount of people that do not have a high school diploma or a GED is very small, yet commit such a large portion of the crime in our country. And so that's where I would start. Now, there would be some issues, and I'm sure that there are some exceptions of people that have dropped out of high school. I know there are. There are exceptions of people, that have had to drop out for one reason or another and are doing very well for themselves, and that's great. I know there's exceptions. There's exceptions to every rule, but generally speaking, I believe that is a big issue, and one that I don't think is morally acceptable. 16, you're still just you're still just a kid, and that's just the way these things are. You just got your license. Nobody who just gets their license wants to drive to school every day. It's just the way it goes. All right, good question. Golly, love them. All right, next. What made you decide to teach American history? I would say the reason I teach American history is because when I was growing up, my grandmother and my grandfather they were passionate about American history. They would ask me a bunch of questions, teach me a lot about, especially like U.S. presidents. And we went to Washington, D.C. several times together. And if you've never been to Washington, D.C., I highly recommend it. You would not have to be like huge into American history to enjoy Washington, D.C. It is, It's one of my favorite cities. I hadn't been that many places, but Washington, D.C. is definitely one of them. But I would definitely say my grandparents had a large part to do in my love for American history. And then I think I just kind of have some of the skills, some of the abilities, some of the capacities to teach. So there we go. All right, next. Do you think the U.S. should have dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki? So this is a question about the ending of World War II, the first atomic bombs that were ever used in warfare, America and Japan. It is a tough question because it's hard to justify that many that many deaths of civilians. Around 200 to 300,000 Japanese civilians died because of the atomic bombs that were dropped. But do I think that there was a better option? It's hard to say. I'm not saying maybe that we should have done that, but I definitely see why. And in retrospect, that might have been the best. That might have been the best solution. Just a little bit of background on that. This is just my opinion as well. That was just my opinion. I'll give you some reasoning behind it though. In Japan's 3,000-year history, they have never surrendered in war. Now, America and the Allied powers were seeking an unconditional surrender from Japan, mainly because the way that World War I had ended, it had ended in an armistice, which is just kind of like a peace agreement. And we see that World War I, the way that it ended and its subsequent fallout is what led to World War II. So there was no way that the Japanese were going to surrender unconditionally. There hasn't even been, it's just not Japanese culture. It's not. The Japanese were willing and had been training civilians to take up the fight against, the Allied powers, militarily. They were very much willing to sacrifice millions upon millions of civilians. And that's, again, so does that make what the U.S. did morally right? It may have saved more people in the long run, and that's just Japanese civilians. You look at what the alternative would have been in like a ground war. Well, now you're talking about, again, thousands upon thousands of military deaths as well, not just from America, but from Great Britain. At that point, Russia was also the Soviet Union. They were also invading Japan. And that also brings another point. If the U.S. wouldn't have, dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, well, Russia, Soviet Union, was already invading Manchuria, which was Japanese-controlled China, and they were taking prisoners of war POWs from Manchuria, and over 300,000 civilians died in those camps because they were put into what they called the gulags. So even if the U.S. would have stayed out of it and let the Soviet Union handle Japan, it may have been worse for Japan. Now, that doesn't take into necessarily account like the environmental impact of atomic weapons. It's a loaded question. That's the best I can answer it, is that in retrospect, I would hate for it to ever happen again. But it may have saved more lives in the end. And is that the goal? War's, hard to justify in a moral sense, in any way you look at it, because again, people are dying. And so what are they dying for? It's a loaded question. It's a good question, but it's a loaded question. All right, let's move on. All right. When and where did you graduate? I graduated high school from Randleman High School in 2008. I got my associate's degree from GTCC, Gifford Technical Community College, in 2012. It took me a couple of years to get my associate's degree. I had to take some remedial math classes because I wasn't a good student in high school. Was not a good student in high school. But once I got into like my actual major, after I got all the prerequisite classes out of the way, I went to Greensboro College, graduated from there with my bachelor's degree in political science, 2014. Took about a year off. I wouldn't say necessarily a year off because I started in the education field shortly after graduating. But in 2000, yeah, I'd say it's about 2 years between when I finished my bachelor's degree and when I started my master's degree. And I got my master's degree from Liberty University in education. And one day I'll get my doctorate. So just the way it goes. But I'll tell you this, I didn't have the best grades in high school. You don't have to be, you can, it took a lot of work, and I'm not saying I'm an inspiration or anything like that, but if you didn't do so well, if you're not doing so well right now, you can turn that around at any time. Trust me. If you could choose any fictional world to live in, what would it be? I'm going to have to, part of me wants to say Star Wars, but I don't know if that's fictional because it was just a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So that might not be fictional. Let me go with Harry Potter universe. Yeah, let me go with that. Dude, I'm still waiting on my owl to get here. I think it just got lost or maybe somebody shot it. I don't know. But dude, reading the Harry Potter books growing up, phenomenal. You can just watch the movies. You can just watch the movies. The books are much better, in my opinion, even though I think the movies are very good. But yeah, that's Harry Potter for sure. All right, next. If you could only eat one food for the rest of your life, what would it be? There's two that come to mind right off the top of my head, pizza and sushi. I'll tell you what they have in common and then I'll pick one. So pizza and sushi, you can do anything with it. What kind of crust you want, what kind of sauce you want, what kind of toppings you want. You can have breakfast pizza. You can have dessert pizza. You can have pizza without cheese. You can do anything to pizza. Same thing with sushi. Okay, what kind of rice you want? Okay, what kind of style do you want? Sashimi? Do you want fried sushi? Do you want raw? Or do you want? So many different options there. What do you want in it? Do you want crab? Do you want shrimp? Do you want, cucumber? Do you want cream cheese? You can do anything. And I'm just giving you some very small examples. So, between those two, that's tough. I don't know. Pizza's my favorite food, I would say, but I don't think I could eat that every day. That's going to get heavy. That's going to get heavy on you, and you're going to gain some weight. Unless you're only eating like 2 pieces of pizza a day, or not 2 pieces, but 2 pieces of pizza, like for breakfast, 2 pieces of pizza for lunch, 2 pieces of pizza for dinner, and I can't do that. I have no self-control when it comes to pizza, so I don't know if I do with sushi either, though. Oh God! All right, I'm gonna go pizza, and I'm just gonna eat once a day, and I'm gonna eat a whole pizza. It's just the way it's gonna go. All right, next, let's see. What's something you're excited about talking? I think I wrote this down wrong. What's something you are excited about talking about in American history? There's so much to narrow it down. So I'll just list a couple things. Revolutionary War, absolutely. I love talking about the American Revolutionary War because it sets the groundwork for what is to come. The Constitutional Convention and the constitutional debates, that is still something that affects us to this day. So the fault, none of these things were done in, just because. There were so many thought out reasons as to why we were fighting in the American Revolutionary War, the reason we declared independence, the way that the Constitution was drafted and how it was drafted, and the fact that it was drafted to be changeable and adaptable, but still have certain core values within it. It's beautiful. I would say that period right there, I would say like the Andrew Jackson presidency, that's always interesting because last thing for this video, and then I'll post another one. What's the president's job? Is it to do what's right or to do what the people want? And what happens if what the people want isn't the right thing to do? What's the president's job? It's a good question. All right, I'll see you again here in just a minute.